morning saw another plane crash, which took away 6 lives, including one of the most powerful and consequential mass leader, astute strategist, Ajit Pawar. When we are talking about this particular incident, it might make you think that plane crashes have become so common. There have been multiple lives that have been taken, be it the Air India incident that we saw last year, be it other plane helicopter crashes, be it during the Kedarnath Yatra, etc. But where does it stop? Who looks into it? Who is responsible for all of it? Needs to be understood so that we can probably look for some accountability and understand that what is the starting point of all of this and where is the end. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and in today's session, we will be looking into the aviation architecture in India in the lieu of recent plane crash that we have seen, where we have seen Ajit Pawar, who was one of finest, powerful, consequential mass leaders present in Maharashtra, who has decisively shaped Maharashtra political economy over the last 2 decades, and presently he was the deputy CM of the Maharashtra state. So even if such a prominent figure cannot be saved from air accident and the mishap around it, then where does the general public lie? Now when we are discussing this, don't you think in the recent times we have heard about plane crashes, helicopter crashes, overshoots a lot more than we usually used to? And in this context, you have to look into the recent report that has been brought out by Forbes, where the aviation fatalities, they have hit a 7-year high. They have been highest, and this has been clearly recorded as per Aviation Safety Network. Another worst thing that has been highlighted is the fact that the world's worst kind of air crashes have been seen, especially in the recent years. So this clearly puts us in a direction to think more about what the aviation architecture looks like, what is the regulatory mechanism around it, especially with reference to India, and also understand that why such accidents, even in this context where Ajit Pawar has passed away. This particular plane, chartered plane, was supposed to land in Baramati and it went off radar just after some time when it took off, and that is where we see during the landing time this crash has been reported, where all the lives present on the crew were taken away. So who will look into this? Why always landing and takeoff are the most critical points? We will be understanding all of this. So first let us start with the initial point in aviation architecture in our country, that is DGCA. So who exactly is responsible for aviation safety? It is DGCA, that is Directorate General of Civil Aviation. Now this is the institution which is responsible for aircraft certification, airworthiness, if the aircraft is eligible to be flying, pilot licensing, the training, safety audits of the operators, and also enforcement of ICAO norms. So when we are talking about ICAO, that is International Civil Aviation Organization, they set global standards in civil aviation. So the norms need to be enforced at the national level, and that is also looked into by DGCA. And if at all any accident occurs, just like this one, the investigation and the coordination around it is also done by DGCA itself. So this clearly gives an insight into the fact that they are responsible for quality control, mishap management, investigation, understanding, and also enforcement of rules across especially civil aviation. However, even after being such an important regulatory organization, there are certain structural constraints which have been constantly plaguing DGCA and its performance capacity, such as staff shortages, the rapid sectoral expansion. In the recent times, if you say civil aviation is one of the sectors which is expanding rapidly, be it through Udan, be it through presence in the upcoming cities, that expansion with staff shortage makes it further worse. And combine it with the heavy dependence that you see of DGCA on operator self-compliance. That means operators, be it Indigo, be it Vistara, they are responsible for complying on their own. DGCA might conduct an audit, DGCA might look into safety compliance, but in general there is no regular check. And another thing that will give you an insight into this particular accident is the limited oversight that DGCA has, especially over chartered aircraft fleets. So in this particular plane which has crashed, which was carrying Ajit Pawar, this was a chartered aircraft. So the situation is bad enough in general for this regulatory organization, which is looking into civil aviation, which can cost many lives, but it is further worsened for when we are talking about chartered aircraft fleets. Now this is the regulatory organization that we are talking about. If you remember in the start, when we were discussing about the recent crash itself, we saw that as of now AAIB, that is Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, that is the one which is probing the plane crash. So this becomes another organization which is important from the perspective of civil aviation architecture in our country. So this is the second organization that we are going to talk about. Now this was specifically established in 2012 and it functions directly under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. The whole idea of establishment of AAIB was the fact that DGCA can focus on regulation, the investigation can be done in a separate bureau and it would be independent, and understanding of accident investigation and causes would become neutral and away from the regulatory organization itself. Now when we are talking about AAIB, the whole idea and the whole purpose here is to investigate aircraft accidents and look into serious aviation incidents. AIB was the one which looked into Air India crash and the probe thereafter. So why does AIB investigate? It investigates to understand what were the technical causes, if there are human factors they were involved, or if there were systemic failures which are involved. Not at all to assign blame, okay, this was the responsible person, but to understand and ensure that in future such accidents do not take place. So as of now, the probe of this particular plane crash in Baramati, near Baramati airport, will lie with AAIB. Now this is where we need to understand the clear distinction between DGCA, where DGCA is a regulator, however AAIB is an investigator. When DGCA is talking about the role, they will have an oversight and licensing. AAIB will be focusing on accident investigation. DGCA will look into compliance, whereas AAIB will be looking into what kind of cause was responsible for the accident. That means a causal analysis would be focused on. So as DGCA proper functioning will take place, what we will see as a result, that the regulations are being followed, audits are happening, and AAIB as a result will give us safety recommendations which will be again implemented in forms of norms and regulation. Now this brings us to another aspect related to this plane crash which we need to understand, is the fact that while landing and takeoff are the most vulnerable, accident prone phases of any flight. Because if you remember, during the Air India crash, it was during the takeoff within minutes that the accident had happened. So in this context, we have to look into the causes here as well, and we have to understand simply from the aviation science perspective. If we are talking about dangerous phases of flight or critical phases of flight where there are possibility of thing going wrong, there are majorly three phases. The first phase is where the flight takes off. Second, the initial climb that flight does, that is also critical. And after the flight, when the flight is focusing on landing or final takeoff, that becomes the critical part. So we have three critical phases here. First takeoff, then initial climb, and the final approach and landing. And the reasons these are critical and prone to accident is because this is where the flight is at low altitude. That means there is very limited recovery margin. If anything at all goes wrong, the height is so low that pilot or any system itself cannot help in recovery because the time is so less in terms of the dip. Then These are the times when the workload of the pilot is maximum. So the possibility of systemic issue, technical failure or human factor also is maximum here. Another thing that we get to see, that the configuration of the flight is rapidly changing, especially during 3 phases, and this is where the nature also comes into play. This is where the weather affects the most, and it is also dependent on the runway. So the maximum possibilities concentrate in these phases, and as a reason we see the most common causes of accident are mostly approach instability, some mechanical or systemic failure, human error because of excessive workload, or poor visibility or some sort of wind shear is present. That is why these are the phases where maximum accidents, even if you go especially through last year and the causes that have been identified, they are concentrated in these very phases itself. Now on this note, I will be taking you to another important dimension from the perspective of this news and also from the perspective of exam, because Ajit Pawar, hailing from Maharashtra, was not just NCP senior leader, he was also Deputy CM of Maharashtra. So in this context, it also becomes important to look into the constitutional aspect related to Deputy CM as a post itself. So the most important clarification that you need to understand in terms of constitutionality, that this is not a constitutional post. You will nowhere find in the constitution that Deputy CM is mentioned anywhere. It has not been mentioned in Constitution of India or any statute as well. But this has been created by a political convention. He has all the powers that Chief Minister delegates to him, and this is where we get to see the presence of Deputy CM in state politics, where there is coalition management, many parties are coming along, and also political balancing. In this context, you will be clearly able to understand that when we are talking about Deputy CM, and in this context Ajit Pawar, that how instrumental he was in Maharashtra political scenario, that he was positioned here, and it is not just the party in power but the opposition as well is mourning for this particular loss. Because as of now, Maharashtra is at a loss of a central pillar which was present in the contemporary politics. Now on this note, when this fatal incident has happened and it has taken away so many lives, we also need to look into a very important dimension here in context of infrastructure and also regulatory capacity. Because if you see as of now, this incident should bring in the question that yes, we are talking about rapid aviation growth, but what about the safety associated with it? What about the regulation around it? Why the manpower is limited, why the audits are not happening, why the chartered flights are in limited purview of DGCA, and what needs to be reformed. For example, there is need to strengthen DGCA staffing. There is a need to make AIB independent, because as of now it is under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. So when the idea of independent investigation organization is there, it cannot exist under the union government itself. It needs to have proper statutory independent powers. And this is where we also need to bring in enhanced oversight over charter operators and focus so as to ensure that when we are talking about runway, when we are talking about systemic failures, there is better infrastructure, be it the landing infrastructure or be it the technological infrastructure. Because when we are aiming to become a developed economy by 2047, we cannot be plagued by regulatory challenges, aircraft accidents and unknown causes behind it, losing and taking away the valued lives of our country. Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.